Nobody expected it to come from inside the clubhouse. The Dodgers have faced enough external pressure this season, opposing lineups, injury concerns, the weight of expectation that follows a roster assembled to win in October. They have managed most of it quietly and efficiently, the way well-constructed teams learn to manage things when the people inside the building trust each other. But what happened in that dugout did not come from outside. It came from Austin Rushing. It was directed at Shohei Ohtani. And before the damage from that exchange had fully settled, Rushing had turned toward Max Muncy, 23 years old, still finding his footing at this level, and said something that nobody in that dugout was prepared to hear. "Shut up. You're just a kid." By the time Roki Sasaki decided to speak about what he had witnessed, the story had already grown heavier than any single game could contain. The designation for assignment had come quietly, the way those decisions usually do. A roster move. A number changed. A name shifted from one column to another on a spreadsheet that determines, with cold efficiency, who belongs and who does not. Austin Rushing had been told. The organization had communicated it through the proper channels. There were conversations. There were the standard reassurances that these things carry, the language of professionalism that softens a blow without actually reducing its weight. What the Dodgers did not anticipate was what Rushing would carry into the dugout after receiving that news. Not grief, exactly. Not the quiet sadness of a player who accepts the reality of a sport that gives and takes without sentiment. What Rushing carried in was something sharper than that. Something that had been building longer than the DFA itself. Something that found its first target in the most visible person in that clubhouse. Shohei Ohtani. Those who were present described the moment as sudden. Not a slow escalation. Not the kind of tension that builds across innings until it finally breaks. It was immediate. Rushing approached Ohtani in a manner that those nearby described as aggressive, not physical, but with the particular energy of a person who has decided they no longer have anything to lose. The words that followed were not about baseball. They were not about a play or a pitch or a strategic decision that Rushing disagreed with. They were directed at Ohtani in a way that was personal. In a way that, according to those present, seemed designed to provoke a reaction from the one person in that dugout least likely to provide one. Ohtani did not respond in kind. He absorbed it. He took a breath. He did the thing he almost always does, which is find the stillness inside the noise and wait until the noise passes. But the noise did not pass immediately. Because before anyone could intervene, Rushing had turned. And Max Muncy was standing there. Max Muncy is 23 years old. He is the son of the other Max Muncy, which means he has grown up inside the architecture of professional baseball in a way most players have not. He understands the rhythms. He understands the language. He understands, better than most young players, that a clubhouse contains multitudes, personalities and pressures and histories that intersect in ways that do not always resolve cleanly. None of that prepared him for what Rushing said. He had not inserted himself into the situation. He had not spoken out of turn or attempted to intervene in a way that invited what came next. By most accounts, he had simply been present. In the wrong place at the wrong moment, visible to a man who was looking for somewhere to direct what he was carrying. Rushing turned to him and said it clearly enough that multiple people heard it. "Shut up. You're just a kid." Muncy did not respond. He stood there with the particular stillness of someone who has just received something they did not expect and have not yet decided what to do with. The words hung in the air of the dugout for a moment that everyone present described as uncomfortable in a way that went beyond the usual friction of a competitive environment. Then someone moved. And the moment shifted. But it did not disappear. Roki Sasaki had been watching all of it. He is not, by nature, the loudest person in a room. He communicates through his work, through the movement on his pitches, through the preparation that precedes every start, through the focus that opposing hitters describe as almost unsettling in its consistency. He does not often seek the microphone. Which is why, when Sasaki decided to speak, the room paid attention in a particular way. He did not frame what he said as an accusation. He did not perform outrage or arrange his words for dramatic effect. He spoke the way he does most things, directly, without excess, with the precision of someone who has decided that what he is saying matters enough to be said carefully. A reporter asked him about the atmosphere in the dugout during the game. Sasaki was quiet for a moment. "It was not a normal night," he said. Another reporter asked him to explain what he meant. What happened with Rushing, what he said to Shohei, and then what he said to Muncy, that is not something that should happen in a dugout. It is not something that belongs in this clubhouse. He paused. Muncy did nothing. He was standing there. And Rushing said what he said to him because Muncy was young and Rushing believed he could. The room absorbed that. It was the last part that landed most heavily. Not the description of what was said, but the explanation of why. The suggestion that Rushing had chosen Muncy not because of anything Muncy had done, but because of what Muncy represented: youth, vulnerability, a player still establishing himself who might absorb the blow without pushing back. That, Sasaki said, is the part one cannot accept. Sasaki then addressed the passed ball. It had happened in the fourth inning. Muncy behind the plate, a breaking ball that caught more of the zone than expected, a moment of lost tracking that allowed a runner to advance. The kind of mistake that accumulates quietly in a box score without generating the noise that other errors produce. But Sasaki had been on the mound when it happened. And his account of the moment, offered without blame, without the pointed language that Rushing had used, revealed something important about the difference between how accountability functions when it is delivered with respect and how it functions when it is weaponized. Muncy came to the mound immediately, Sasaki said. He didn't wait for me to look at him. He came out and said he was sorry and asked what I needed. That's what a catcher does. That's what a professional does. He looked at the reporters in front of him. He's 23 years old. He made a mistake on a difficult pitch. He took responsibility for it before I could say a word. There is nothing more I can ask. Someone asked whether the passed ball had affected his rhythm on the mound. No, Sasaki said. Because Muncy made sure it didn't. He came to the mound and he reset us both. That's not a kid making an error. That's a player doing his job. Ohtani spoke briefly. He arrived at the media area after Sasaki had finished, and the reporters who were present described his demeanor as composed in the way he is always composed, not the forced composure of someone suppressing something, but the genuine composure of someone who has already decided how they feel and no longer requires the conversation to confirm it. A reporter asked him directly about what Rushing had said. Ohtani considered the question. There are moments, he said slowly, when you understand something about a person that you didn't understand before. Tonight was one of those moments for me. He did not expand on that immediately. Another reporter asked if he felt the situation had been handled appropriately by the organization. I trust this organization, he said. I trust the people in this clubhouse. What happened tonight was one person's decision. It doesn't represent what I see every day in that dugout. Someone asked about Muncy specifically. Whether Ohtani had spoken to him after what Rushing had said. For the first time, something shifted in Ohtani's expression. Not dramatically. Not in a way that produced a moment for the cameras. Just a small change, the way a face changes when a subject moves closer to something genuine. Max is going to be very good, Ohtani said. He already is. And nothing that was said tonight changes that. Not for me. Not for this team. He paused. I made sure he knew that. The Dodgers did not make Rushing available to the media. A team spokesperson confirmed that the organization was aware of the incident and that it was being handled internally. The language was careful and institutional and communicated, without saying so directly, that what had happened was being taken seriously at a level above the dugout. Dave Roberts was the last to speak. He entered the press conference room with the look of a manager who had spent the hours since the final out in conversations that were not easy and decisions that were not finished. He sat down. He adjusted the microphone. He looked at the reporters with the particular directness he brings to moments when he has decided that clarity matters more than comfort. A reporter asked him what had happened with Rushing. "Austin is no longer with the team in the same capacity," Roberts said. "What happened tonight, both the DFA and what occurred in the dugout, are connected. I won't pretend otherwise." Another reporter asked whether the incident with Muncy had factored into the organization's decision. Roberts nodded without hesitation. "How you treat the people around you matters in this game. It matters in this clubhouse. Talent is one part of what we evaluate. Character is another. Tonight made certain things clearer than they had been." He was asked about Muncy. About how the young catcher was doing after everything that had unfolded. Roberts' expression shifted slightly. "Max handled himself with more maturity tonight than some players twice his age would have managed. He made a mistake behind the plate. He owned it immediately, he went to the mound, he did everything right. And then he absorbed something from Rushing that he had no part in causing." Roberts looked down at the table for a moment. "He came and found me after the game. You know what he said? He said he didn't want it to become a distraction. He was worried about the team." Roberts shook his head. 23 years old. Worried about the team. He looked back up. "That tells you everything you need to know about Max Muncy. And honestly, it tells you everything you need to know about the difference between him and what we saw from Rushing tonight." The roster move had come first. The words in the dugout had come after. And somewhere in the sequence of those two events was the shape of something that professional athletes rarely talk about openly, the particular danger of a man who has just been told he is no longer wanted, let loose inside a space where other people are still trying to do their jobs. Rushing had aimed at Ohtani. Ohtani had not broken. He had aimed at Muncy. Muncy had not broken either. And Roki Sasaki, who rarely seeks the microphone, had decided that what he witnessed deserved to be spoken clearly, on record, without softening. Some things belong in the open. What happened in that dugout was one of them.